we're picking on a bunch of people that we hate, a group of uniformly Muslim people who are losing their passports. And we're doing this as a populist way to appeal to the tabloids. And, that's just not what we're about as a country.
Okay. What about, I understand that you're here to talk about the legalities of it. What does her motivation come into this at all in your mind, or is that irrelevant? Because many people are saying, she was only 15. How could she really have understood what she was doing? And then there are people on the other side of the argument that say, excuse me, she very much knew what she was doing. She was recruiting people to kind of to go with her. This was her. She was a supporter of ISIS. This was something she went into, even though she was 15, with her eyes very much open.
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And I'm not going to confess to your listeners about the stupid things I did when I was 15. But
But not on
I've
a par
done,
with this, surely.
no, it's not quite, but I've done some pretty silly things in my life. And, we have to remember that I've been down there to the camps where she is, which we call Guantanamo on the Euphrates. And there's a lot of people who were suckered into this by all of the dreadful propaganda that was coming out of ISIS. And yeah, it's a fabulously stupid thing to do. But look, she's very much changed her views on it. And, she's now in a tent with the Union Jack and all the rest of it. And the question really is what we as a nation should do. The British government has taken the position that she can not be, she's not stateless because she can go to Bangladesh. She's never been to Bangladesh. She was born and raised in Britain. And the Bangladesh foreign minister said they'd hang her if she went to Bangladesh. So what we're doing is, what a number of conservatives have said over the last 24 hours, including David Davis and Saeed Aborsi, that we're picking on a bunch of people that we hate, a group of uniformly Muslim people who are losing their passports, and we're doing this as a populist way to appeal to the tabloids. And that's just not what we're about as a country.
Okay.
We're not about.
Or are we trying to protect ourselves from,
Oh, come on,
from
Asma.
people? No, well, I mean, this is not my view, but this is the
No.
view of many, many people. Are we trying to protect ourselves from people who have changed their minds? They said one thing, then in 2019 she said she had no regrets. Now she's changed her mind. I mean, this is the argument that is advanced by people who are very upset about this, and perhaps they just don't feel safe, and they feel that this sets a precedent for people who have, said that they want to act against the UK. They support an organisation like IS to come back to this country and plot who knows what.
Look, the bottom line is if we are not safe from a young woman like Shamima Begum, then we're not safe from an ant. And, when you look at what goes on ever since 9/11, and I've spent my life battling those things, we have made the world a much more dangerous place because we're hypocrites. Because the first thing we do when we say we're fighting this war for democracy and the rule of law is we start taking all those rights away from people. But we only take them away from one group of people, and those are Muslims. And, that's shocking. And as a result of that, and this is not me talking, this is a member of the US intelligence talking when discussing things like Guantanamo Bay and these populist, ridiculous things that politicians do to try and pander to certain views. What we end up doing is we end up aggravating the victims of those policies, and we create the people who do cause trouble in Britain. And if you look at the people who have caused the problems over the years, and there hasn't been that much, thankfully, they've all been people who have been homebred due to the hypocrisy with which we've approached this. And the same is true of the United States. We need to stand up for what we really stand for, which is decency, human rights, the rule of law, and so forth. And then we'll make the world both a safer place and a better place for us all to live in.
Okay, Clive Stafford-Smith, thank you very much. Human rights lawyer. That is the one approach to this issue. We're going to speak to Rakib Ehsan now, who's a research analyst who writes about the UK's attitude to ethnic minorities. Good morning to you, Rakib.
Morning.
Now, you have described the treatment of Shamima Begum as victim framing. Within that, does this boil down to what you think her motivation was when she was 15?
Well, I think that, Asma, the point that I've often made is that some of the victim framing surrounding Shamima Begum, in my view, is over enthusiastic. I think that it strips her completely of all personal agency and will. I'd make the point that I'm very uncomfortable with the citizenship stripping element of this, but equally, I'm not very keen on expressing any kind of support for the kind of victim framing surrounding Shamima Begum. I'd make the point that when she traveled to Syria to join ISIS, she was 5 years above the age of criminal responsibility in England and Wales. That's 10.
Mm.
So I sit in the middle. I think that this does risk creating a tiered citizenship system. Something that I'm wholly against, but equally, I do think that there are people who are over sympathetic towards her.
And why do you think that is? Why are they oversympathetic? Because of the facts or because of their own political persuasion?
I think it could be possibly their political persuasion. I think some people have fallen into the trap of really believing into the PR exercise that we've seen in recent times surrounding Shamima Begum, the adoption of Western style clothing, the use of makeup, strategically placing a Union flag pillow behind her for photos. So I think that there are some people who are sympathetic towards her as a result of that. Quite frankly, I think that one of the more appalling elements of all of this is that the victims of ISIS, their experiences have not been platformed by the mainstream coverage, especially Yazidis who bore the brunt of the ISIS's genocidal activities. I felt like that could have
Mm.
been covered a lot more.
I mean that has been covered previously, but you mean throughout this debate about Shamima Begum?
Absolutely. So, for example, the BBC podcast, I felt that the persecution of Yazidis at the hands of ISIS that has been covered, but in my view, that hasn't been covered enough, in my opinion.
Right. Um, so you talked about the citizenship thing being a slightly separate thing for you. Do you have a
Mm.
view on whether she should be allowed to come back?
Well, I think that when it came to the immigration court's ruling, it didn't come as a surprise to me because if they were to have restored her citizenship, that would have ultimately been overturning the former Home Secretary Sajid Javid's decision to
Mm.
revoke her British citizenship on national security grounds. So that would have been a very significant decision.
But would you have
Uh,
felt happy, safe? Not happy, but would you have felt sufficiently safe? Because that's the argument, isn't it? We don't by people who don't want her back. They say, well, she's
mm,
not going to. We're not going to feel safe because this is someone who at one point expressed sympathies for a
mm.
terrorist organization. So how
Asma,
would you feel?
we have hundreds of ISIS returnees in the country at this present moment.
Mm.
I'd also make the point that the country's border security is far from stellar. So I think for me that those are very serious security-related considerations to make.
Mm.
I think also another problem with the citizenship stripping is that it did run the risk of undermining diplomatic ties with Bangladesh, which is my country of origin.
Well, I was going to
And
say, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I don't think that's we have a post-Brexit government. I don't think it's ideal that by citizenship stripping that they undermine diplomatic ties with fast developing members of the Commonwealth, such as Bangladesh.
Mm.
Shamima Begum has never visited Bangladesh. In the recent documentary, she said that she didn't even want, she wanted to detach herself from her Bengali identity.
Mm.
If anyone understands Bangladesh's history, especially the circumstances surrounding the 1971 Liberation War and its zero tolerance approach towards Islamist extremism, they would know that it's a country not to be trifled with when it comes to Shamima Begum.
Rakib, thank you for talking to us. Very interesting, Rakib Ehsan, who is a research analyst who writes about the UK's attitude to ethnic minorities. And if you like that,
you can listen to us.
We're sticking Aasmah. Have you forgotten?
Well done. Every Monday to Thursday on Times Radio Breakfast.